Listen to our voices, friends.
Oh, this is all very like ASMR right now.
Isn't it? I love it.
Our dulcet tones coming through to your ear holes.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
I'm loving this. If you're watching on Patreon, you see what we're talking about. Hopefully, if you have ears, you hear what we're talking about.
Yes, and if you're also watching, don't mind how red and shiny the weather is. A hot one. I know we talk about the weather a lot, but it was a spicy one.
There's only so cute that you can be when it's like disgusting.
It's hard to put makeup on top of a layer of sweat.
It is.
All that being said, new mics, new headphones. Oh my God, I feel like
this is a big move.
Big girl podcast things. And honestly, shout out to you guys because y'all made this happen. Our beautiful, beautiful patrons on Patreon have really contributed a huge chunk towards this upgrade in our podcasting lives. So, you're the bomb.com, as I always say, but like, I'm so freaking excited.
This was like the last big upgrade that we wanted to make. I feel like this year we've done so much. We've moved into the studio. We have new sound equipment. We're going to be launching some brand new stuff, hopefully in a month or two.
Yes.
Like it's a good time. We're doing okay.
It is. The summer of 2024 is good for the Grim curriculum.
It sure is. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it because we're about to go from like positive and excited straight down into the pits of hell.
Yep.
So that being said, hello everyone. I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to the Grim Curriculum.
And thank you all so much for joining us today.
Last week, we introduced you to Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka, two people who we would argue are among the most well-known Canadian serial killers.
We've spoke about their early lives, how they met, and their weird relationship dynamic.
That, along with Paul's crimes as the Scarborough rapist, helped lead us into one of the most difficult series that we have done to date.
Today, we are heading into even darker territory, and with that, we're going to give you all another warning. We will be talking about the crimes that Paul committed, as well as the couple's actions that resulted in murder.
So without further ado, let's buckle up and get ourselves back into the roller coaster ride that is Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka.
I will just say before we continue, I first thought that we were reading part 1 again because we tried so many times last week to make it work, and I'm like, I feel like we've read this already. We did 6 times.
I'm scared that once we get because we were like here, and I'm like scared to get to this part and then just have it be like, nope.
So far so good. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. Okay. We last left off with Paul asking Karla what she would think if he told her that he was a rapist.
Her response, I think it would be cool.
Yeah, because of course she did.
Pick me ass, Karla.
Oh my God. Another thing that Karla was apparently completely fine with was Paul's obsession with her younger sister, Tammy.
As we mentioned last week, Paul loved the idea of being the one to take someone's virginity. To his absolute dismay, Karla was not a virgin when they met. And remember last week we talked about, or 2 weeks ago, I guess now, the virgin farm that he dreamed of?
That is so foul.
I found more details about what he actually meant by that. So at first I kind of just thought he wanted like a group of ladies that were virgins that he could take their virginity. But the idea of the virgin farm was he would have virgins. He would then impregnate said virgins and then take the virginities of their offspring.
Oh, God. I honestly didn't think the concept could get worse.
Yeah, with Paul, it can always get worse.
Which actually reminds me of Mr. Rock Terrio.
Yeah.
I feel like that's almost the vibe he was going for in the wilderness.
You know, I feel like with Canadian serial killers, we don't have a lot of them, obviously.
But they sure are notable.
Right? Like the ones that we do. Like think about like Terrio, Picton, Paul Bernardo and Karla. Like when we do it in a big ass way.
Apparently. So Paul began peeking into the window of Tammy's room, especially while she was changing. This is something that Karla was very much aware of and fully allowed.
At this point, he had broken up with Jennifer. He was obviously cheating on her. However, he projected those feelings onto her and accused her of being unfaithful to him. This escalated into a huge fight between the two of them that ended up with him losing his temper and them breaking up. He drove her home, and every time they stopped at a light, he would hit her hard. He then took her to an abandoned spot.
According to Lethal Marriage, he took out a knife and had full intention of stabbing her. He dropped the knife and Jennifer took off running. The two never saw each other again.
I wanted to find some information about what became of Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
I had really no luck at all, and I can't imagine how she felt afterwards finding out who he was and what she had dodged, because really he tried to kill her.
I absolutely think if he had not dropped the knife that fateful night, she would have been one of his first murder victims.
Normally I would say like, hey, if you guys have information, email us, blah, 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 but let's just leave Jennifer alone.
Yeah,
Yep.
Jennifer deserves peace and tranquility, and yeah, we're going to leave her very much alone.
I hope wherever she is happy.
I hope so too. Paul and Karla's sex life intensified after all of this. While she would later say that she was coerced into engaging in BDSM type sex, notes and letters that she wrote to Paul during this time paint her as a very eager participant.
The notes are so gross because Karla is very like cutesy.
Yes.
And so the notes are like, there's flowers on them, there's hearts, there's all this cute stuff, there's like super cute terminology, and then she's like, I want you to rip apart my insides. Cutie.
Heart XOXO.
Karla.
Oh God. He is still fully committing sexual assaults at this time. The majority of these victims would see his face, but it would be years before he was identified. One victim even reported seeing a woman in a nearby car. She appeared to be pointing a video camera at them.
Like we mentioned last week, we're going to see the police fumble this one big time.
They had even interviewed Jennifer. She had spoken to police about the abuse that she endured while with Paul. A report was filed, but not much would come from it. She told police that he drove a white Ford Capri.
So this is a lot of information. So you're probably wondering, why didn't anything happen with this report? Because it sounds like they've got their guy.
Well, you see, the person who was taking all of this valuable information down dated it wrong.
They got the year wrong.
Yep.
It was taken in January. And so when he dated it, he put the year prior to it by accident.
Oh dear. This report would be lost for 2 years. During that time, Paul continued to sexually assault young women around the area.
By 1989, everyone was familiar with the Scarborough rapist. Young women were terrified, and it was all over the news.
Seeing these interviews is jarring. You can see women were horrified, and they just wanted him caught. Police had interviewed and cleared over 1,000 suspects. A $150,000 reward was offered for information regarding the man that everyone was looking for.
And Paul knew this. He absolutely loved it. One victim reported him saying to her,
I am the Scarborough rapist, and they'll never catch me.
It reminds me a lot of cases like Son of Sam or Richard Ramirez, because this entire city was horrified. Everyone knew what was going on. And the thing about it is Karla's friends, they were the age of a lot of the victims, so they were scared too. And I picture that they all talked about it. They had to have talked about it. And she knew exactly what was going on.
Well, I think I maybe mentioned it last week, or perhaps we talked about it when we were trying to record this the first time. But if I was friends with Karla and I found out that it was your boyfriend that had this entire city's female population on eggshells, I'd beat the crap out of you myself.
Oh my God, yeah.
I would be furious.
Something a reporter said stands out.
The key to this man's capture could very well be a woman, perhaps a wife, a mother, a co-worker, or a lover. Wow, that is on point.
Yep, exactly. In May of 1990, another victim was able to get a good look at the man who attacked her. It was from this report that Betty Clark, a police artist, was able to create the composite photo of the Scarborough rapist.
She sat with the victim for 2 hours, gathering details about the man who had assaulted her. The police released this image to the public, and it was everywhere.
Keep in mind that at this point, the attacks have been happening for 3 years. Hundreds of tips were called in, and at one point, police were going door to door showing locals the photo in hopes that someone would say that they knew him.
What shocked the police the most during this time was that the attacks completely stopped. Usually, someone like this just won't stop. Instead, they escalate. For a while, it was assumed that maybe he had gone to jail or simply died. What they didn't know was that Paul had just moved from Scarborough to St. Catharines.
He had begun living with the Homolka family. Karla at this point was working at the Martindale Animal Hospital. This is where she met her friend Leanne Plato, who's given some fantastic interviews. Leanne was 16 and Karla was 20.
She describes Karla as very nice and that she spoke very highly of Paul. What struck Leanne as strange was that Paul always wanted to pick Karla up. She'd tell her that Paul didn't like her driving. He also didn't allow her to go out. However, the two would eventually get engaged.
We want to share a list of rules that Paul had for Karla, and Charlotte is going to read them for us now.
This is going to make y'all mad.
And this is real.
Never let anyone know our relationship is anything but perfect. Don't talk back to Paul. Be a perfect girlfriend for Paul. If Paul asks for a drink, bring him one quickly and happily. Remember that you're stupid. Remember you're ugly. Remember you're fat. I don't know why I tell you these things because you never change. Just normal relationship things.
Yep.
Am I right, ladies?
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Just brutal. But the thing is, if you beat your partner down like that and you make them think that they're crap, they're not going to leave you. And that's the thing, like a lot of you, if you're wondering like, oh, well, why didn't she leave him? Why didn't she leave him? She was, she was being controlled by him in a lot of ways. He is older than her. He is demanding how she does things and what she does. She is a victim up until a certain point, and we're going to get that point very soon.
Absolutely. The control from the outside looking in was very apparent. This is all while his obsession with Tammy is growing. Paul was also no longer working as an accountant and was smuggling cigarettes full time.
At one point in November of 1990, he was questioned by police. He happily provides them with his DNA. Nothing would come from this for a couple of years.
Let's touch on that real quick.
So think about the number of suspects who've been questioned and had their DNA taken, right? There was one single person working on all of this. Just one. They had one scientist for all of these samples, and that blows my mind.
Well, and like we said, there were over 1,000 people questioned. Yep. One fella sorting through this. And I'm not exactly sure how the DNA testing process works. I should really look into it because I do love forensics. But to have one fella in a lab doing this, and not just probably working on this case, but working on other cases too.
The thing is, I'm pretty sure it was semen.
Oh, gross.
So I just picture this guy in like a room full of like semen.
Little test tubes.
And it's just one guy and he's so overwhelmed.
I'm so sorry, my guy. According to testimony provided by Paul, there were numerous assaults of Tammy. On July 24th, 1990, Karla stole Valium from her work. She crushed it into Tammy's spaghetti, which caused her to pass out. Paul then assaulted her while Karla watched. Tammy woke up before he was finished.
Paul was by no doubt grooming Tammy. He'd buy her and her friends gifts, and on at least one occasion, he served them drinks that they were suspicious of because they had, and I quote, a strange film with flecks floating on top of it.
I'm going to say this in any situation. If there is a film on top of something you're drinking and you know for a fact you didn't put it there, do not drink that.
Yeah, and they would joke about it too. Like they were like, "Oh, Paul's serving us weird drinks." But
girls.
Because you're not going to think.
No, of course not. You think, "Hey, this is like the cool older brother.
Yep.
You know, he's hanging out with us. Isn't that awesome?" No, absolutely not.
And if I remember correctly, he basically just kind of like, they were like, "What is this?" And he laughed it off and he said it was from like the dishwashing detergent or whatever.
Oh God. Despite all of that, the couple went into their first Christmas living together excitedly and joyfully. Since Paul enjoyed filming everything, there's a ton of footage from around this time.
Seeing him film her during this time is so creepy. He's obsessed with her. You can tell by how he speaks to her and how he interacts with her. Like he was obsessed.
And when you're seeing it filmed from, it literally is from like his point of view, like through his eyes. I do not like that at all.
Remember, she's being watched by him through the window. Not only that, he would have Karla pretend to be Tammy while the two of them were having sex. And he would go into Tammy's room while she was sleeping to masturbate.
That is so fucking foul. On December the 23rd, the family had a small Christmas party. During the celebrations, Tammy was given some drinks. The Homolka parents approved of her having a few, despite the fact she was only 15. Eventually, the majority of the family went to bed while Paul, Tammy, and Karla stayed up.
And I mean, I'm sure many of us consumed alcohol
Oh,
underage.
yeah.
Tammy and her parents probably thought if she was going to do it, she may as well do it with her sister that she trusted and looked up to.
Absolutely. And I think anybody, well, most people, you've had a little rum and eggnog with the
Yeah.
family or, a teeny glass of sherry or something. I don't know.
And sadly, that's basically what it was, is they were drinking rum and eggnog
Ugh,
because it was
way
Christmas.
to ruin a Christmas treasure.
Mm-hmm.
The family had no clue that Karla had given Tammy to Paul as a Christmas gift.
Karla had stolen a substance called halothane from work. Halothane is a clear and colorless liquid that is often used as an anesthetic in the veterinary field. They spiked her rum and eggnog with it, and when she passed out, they held a cloth soaked with halothane on her face. This caused a chemical burn that would essentially be ignored by investigators.
Paul and Karla both got undressed and he began to sexually assault the unconscious Tammy. Then Karla got involved. She performed oral sex on her little sister. They filmed all of this.
While this was happening, they didn't notice that Tammy's neck was hanging in a way that was stopping her from breathing.
She began to turn blue, and then she started to throw up because of the angle the vomit filled her lungs. Paul and Karla got dressed and they dragged Tammy back to her own bed. Paul performed CPR on her while Karla called for an ambulance. She then disposed of the halothane that was left over.
Tammy was taken to the hospital. When the paramedics arrived on scene, they assumed that the trio had been using drugs and drinking. They put that together and decided Tammy had choked on her own vomit due to overconsumption of alcohol.
No one assumed that the 15-year-old had been drugged. Paul and Karla said that they had fallen asleep and woken up to the sound of her gagging. As they were being questioned, Paul and Karla got a call from the hospital saying that Tammy had died.
Paul began to scream and wail while shouting, "No!" and pulling his hair out. Like the most dramatic, like he got on his knees and he's like ripping his hair out and he's just screaming over
Oh
and
my
over again.
god. Friends and family were obviously shocked by her death. However, no one had a clue about what had actually happened. The death was ruled a tragic accident.
This was despite the fact that her face had chemical burns on it, as well as marks that clearly showed she had been dragged around. There's photos of her that were taken after her death, and the burns are huge. They go from like the bottom of her face up to almost her eyes. It's a big spot on her face, and it's like, what did you think this was?
Guys, I don't, they're very visible. I do not understand how this was missed. I don't know if they just assumed that it was part of her choking or what happened, but
I read something, and I wasn't going to include this, but I'll share it because I don't know how accurate it is. But there are some reports that said one of the reasons why that happened was it was Christmas night. It was very late.
mhm.
And the medical examiner may or may not have been drunk.
Ah.
Yep.
So he kind of got called in for this job, but may have had a few eggnogs himself.
Yes. The death of Tammy Homolka is so, so sad because she loved Karla. She trusted her and she looked up to her. And this level of betrayal is just horrific. And the fact that this is essentially just the start of them is just awful. I see zero remorse with Karla. I think the level of the two of them being upset over this was more because the situation escalated in a way that they didn't want, not because they were sad. Because I don't think that these two had the ability to feel guilt. Because if they did, they would have stopped after Tammy.
Yes, absolutely. I think, like you say, they were sad that it got out of control, that they were not in control of the situation the entire time. And also now that this victim of theirs, that they were constantly victimizing, was gone.
Yes, because the idea was not for her to die. The idea was for them to drug her, Paul to assault her, Tammy to wake up, and then he. She has no idea.
Exactly. And it probably would have continued.
Mm-hmm.
Karla's friends would report holding her as she cried about her sister's passing. During the funeral, Paul and Karla appeared to be inconsolable. Due to this, no one questioned them. Paul did talk to close friends about being worried that he would get in trouble for supplying her with the alcohol.
A month after her death, the couple moved out of the Homolka house in order to allow her parents to mourn in private. They rented a house in Port Dalhousie. 57 Bayview Drive. This, of course, was mainly funded by Paul's cigarette smuggling. He was making a boatload of money doing this.
I can't imagine being able to afford a house just off of that alone. But I mean, we talked about it before. He was going over the border sometimes 4 times a day.
This was
So
also in the 90s.
very true. Once they moved in, he began filming everything even more. The majority of their lives would be documented on camera, and they also got a puppy named Buddy.
Surprise, surprise, Paul was not very nice to the dog, but it led more into the image that he wanted for them. Nice house, pretty fiance, and a cute puppy.
Buddy was poorly trained and spent a lot of his time locked in a cage in their basement.
And this all brings us to June 15th, 1991. It was early morning, and Paul was driving around looking for license plates to steal. This is when he spotted 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffy.
Leslie had stayed out past her curfew a few times, which obviously had upset her parents. They told her that if she missed curfew one more time, she'd come home to the door locked.
A group of Leslie's friends had passed away in a tragic car accident. She had gone to a memorial for one of them with some friends, and they ended up staying out late afterwards.
The kids were coping the best they could. A bunch of them had gone out to a nearby forest where they had a few drinks and consoled each other. A few of them walked her home and stayed with her while she tried to open the side door of her house. It was locked. She told her friends they didn't have to wait for her because she was sure her parents had left the front door locked. They did not.
She walked to a nearby payphone and phoned another friend. The two chatted for a while, and Leslie asked her if she could just stay the night at her house. Her friend said no. Leslie told her she was going to go back home to try to wake her mom up. This was the last time her loved ones would hear from her.
I can't imagine how her parents must have felt after this.
Yeah.
Knowing that had she been able to get in the house, this very, very, very likely would not have happened. I'm by no means placing the blame on them. It's not a step that I would have taken as a parent. However, I can kind of see where they're coming from in that sense. You know, there's going to be consequences to your actions. But for this to be the consequences of their actions is so heartbreaking.
And the friend, too, because the friend was just like, sorry, you can't stay over tonight. Like, you just can't. Maybe her parents had said no, which is probably the case. And then suddenly
this
that
happens.
You have that guilt on you.
I can't imagine. What happened next, we know from Paul's confession. Apparently, he saw her walking alone right by her house. He approached her and offered her a cigarette. She accepted, and the two walked back to his car to get it. He then blindfolded her and forced her into the vehicle.
When they got to the house, Paul woke Karla up and told her that he brought home a playmate. The rest of this we know from the tapes. Quick clarification for anyone wondering, the tapes were destroyed. However, they were played 3 times during the trial, which is how we have this information.
Karla and Paul tortured Leslie together. At one point, they gave her a teddy bear to comfort her. Paul began taping Leslie while she went to the bathroom. Karla, bored of all this, decided to go back to bed.
I am not the most emotional person when it comes to crying and whatnot, but her story breaks my heart. All of these murders, obviously very devastating, but what happened to Leslie just hits so hard. There's a 7-page victim impact statement from her mom that she reads during Bernardo's parole hearings, and it's heartbreaking.
And again, I can't imagine having to go through that, you know, year in, year out, every time his parole comes up and having to stand up there and defend the reason why you think he should remain locked up forever. Yeah. That morning, Karla woke up infuriated, not because her fiancé had been sexually assaulting a young girl while she slept, but because he used their fancy champagne glasses to get Leslie to urinate as much as possible. Here's a quote from Karla.
There were 2 champagne glasses on the dining room table, and we had these really expensive champagne glasses from France, which we never used. He had those out, and the 2 of them had been drinking champagne from those glasses, and I was really mad.
In the tapes, when you see it during her confessions, she's like, we never got to use them, and suddenly he was using them on her. And it's like, Karla, I think you're missing the bigger picture here, honey.
Oh, yeah.
As Paul tortured Leslie, Karla once again seemed unbothered. She walked the dog and then read a book while Leslie was subjected to horrific abuse.
Leslie's mother phoned the police that morning when her daughter didn't come home. Unfortunately, this wasn't the first time she called them regarding her daughter, and the police thought this would be like every other time and Leslie would come home, so they didn't bother to look any further.
Eventually, Karla decided to join in again. They forced Leslie to pleasure him at the same time as Karla.
What happens next depends on who you ask. Karla would say that Paul strangled Leslie until she died. However, Paul would blame her death on a lethal dose of halcyon administered by Karla.
On the 16th of June, Paul and Karla had the Homolka family stay over for dinner to celebrate Father's Day, all while Leslie's body was in their bedroom.
Basically, they have a body upstairs, Father's Day dinner happening on the main floor, and evidence of a horrific torture session in the basement.
I can't imagine being. I keep saying I can't imagine. I really can. This whole case is mind boggling
Yep.
to me because of the absolute just horror of it all. But to have your parents over for Father's Day dinner, knowing that if they take one wrong step in that house, they are going to come across something very fucking awful.
But the thing is, the kind of people that they are, they probably love that.
Oh, I think they definitely got off on the fact that, hey, we have brought innocent people into our fucked up little world.
It's a dirty little secret that they just know about.
Exactly. No one reported anything strange during that dinner. Apparently, Paul talked a lot about how he wanted to set up a recording studio in the house because, like we briefly mentioned before, Paul wanted to be a rapper.
He thought he was the next Vanilla Ice. Have you heard his rap?
No.
Okay, so what I want to do is after we're done recording, I would like us to take some time. I want to show it to you.
Okay.
And we're going to record our reactions. I've heard it, but I want people to see your reactions. And we're going to put it up on patreon.com/the grim curriculum for y'all to see. Because it's, you got to hear it.
Oh, man.
It took me a while to find it, but I found it and I was just like, what?
I don't do well with cringe.
Oh, you're going to,
you know what?
The secondhand embarrassment may or may not kill you. This might be the end of the show because Charlotte might die of just cringe.
Stay
but
tuned.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Afterwards, Leslie's body was dismembered and encased in large concrete blocks that were dropped into Lake Gibson, where they would not be found for another 2 weeks.
They did this wrong too. They bought a dozen bags of concrete and thought that they could just put her remains into the concrete and have it sink to the bottom, never to be seen again. However, the water levels in the lake would regularly go up and down, and eventually the water level went down and the blocks were visible.
Leslie would be identified by her braces and dental records.
The day she was found would prove to be one to remember for Paul and Karla, not because of Leslie, though. It would happen on the day the two tied the knot and became husband and wife.
And that is where we will be picking it up again next week, folks.
There's so many details I omitted about what happened to Leslie because there's a line. I want everyone to have the information, but there's certain things I read that I'm like, y'all don't need to know. If you want to know, look it up. But like,
absolutely,
you can live without this information. We say it all the time. There's some things and some information you can't unlearn, and you just don't need to know.
Absolutely. And there's like anything, there's sort of a spectrum of interest, if you will, right? Like you can come at it and you can know the facts. You can know, yep, this was a couple who killed, victims. He was a horrible rapist. That's all one thing.
Yeah.
But we've talked about stumbling across even crime scene photos. You can stumble across crime scene photos, even old ones like with Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia. And those are in black and white, and those are still pretty fucking unforgettable if you did not want to see them.
Yeah.
So by all means, if you are interested and it's something that you want to dig further into, by all means, go for it. But we don't want to be the reason that we ruin your psyche today.
The good thing about it is a lot of this information is not out there. There is the one photo of Tammy. But because the tapes were thankfully destroyed, we don't see a lot of this brutality. But again, the jury had to watch them 3 times. And it was like I think it was like 20 some hours of footage.
It was a lot. Her deposition was very long.
Yeah.
Her confession went for hours and hours and hours, and she spoke very freely to a certain degree. She certainly protects herself, but she told him everything they wanted to know.
Next week, we're going to talk about another one of their murders, as well as the trial and what happened afterwards. And then we're going to wrap this little terrible gift up with a nice, horrible bow. And that'll be the story of Paul and Karla.
So thanks for sticking through it with us.
Champs.
You are.
All right. So, like I said, we're going to be posting the rap reaction video on Patreon.
Yay.
Lots of great stuff on there. Video versions of all of the episodes, of course. There is a free trial that you can sign up for. So you can get some of those perks for a week if you want to just test the waters and see how you feel.
Mhm.
And if you do want to be a free member, you can sign up for that and get early episode reveals. So either way, there's a ton of perks. Check it out. We are going to be launching on some new platforms soon.
Yes, we sure are.
Very exciting. We're going to be making that announcement in the very near future. You may have seen it if you follow us on the socials, which you should. So go take a look. But with that being said, let's thank our Grim VIPs.
Yes, the wonderful, the fabulous Kevinus Musicus, Stephen Centauri, Atlantean Jedi, Judy, Mayhem Mudkip, Hillary, Brian, Lisa, and Bob.
I don't think you've ever read them.
It's been a long time,
Dang.
I think.
All right.
And honestly, I said it kind of in our little chat at the very beginning of the episode. You guys are a huge part of the reason why we were able to upgrade our mics. I also want to preface that with saying this is our first time with the new mics. It's our first time having our own mics. We usually record on one mic.
Mhm.
That being said, please be gentle when I'm editing. We are also figuring this out for the first time. We are not audio engineers.
No.
I wish we were. This would be a whole lot easier if we were, but I am learning. Let us know the feedback. Let us know what you think. I'm always open to positive criticism, always. Constructive criticism,
Yes,
if
of
you will.
course.
But yeah, shout out to the beautiful patrons and everybody else that supported us. Y'all are the reason. Well, you're not the whole reason we do this. We do this because we love doing this.
Yeah.
But you're certainly a huge part of it. And yeah, thank you so much.
Knowing that people listen definitely keeps the fire burning.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, you're the reason why we've been able to upgrade a little bit each time. We've got wonderful new things in the works. I think probably the next step will maybe be a new camera, but
yeah,
that is for down the road. That's for
absolutely. And with that being said, whatever platform you're listening on, please take a minute and either give us a thumbs up, rate us 5 stars, share it on your Instagram, your Twitter, wherever. All of that stuff goes a really long way. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. And a friendly reminder that we get together on YouTube at 12 p.m. MST on Saturdays for the episode launch. We discuss it in real time, and it's a good time.
It is. And I've mentioned it a few times before. This is strictly based on my schedule because I'm the one that edits. But if I do get things edited before Saturday morning, which sometimes happens, I throw it up on Patreon as soon as I can. And so I'm going to put it out there. If you're listening to this on Saturday when it released, there's a lot of patrons that have already listened to it because I put it up on Friday. So
yeah,
just saying.
Be the first. Come on now.
Yeah. I can't be consistent at this point because sometimes the week gets away on me, but sometimes it gets up there early.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
We tried.
All right. So as always, thank you all so much for listening. This has been
The Grim Curriculum.
All right. I've got a fun fact for you.
Please tell.
Did you know that giraffes are 30 times more likely to get struck by lightning than people? Because they tall.
That makes sense, but that also makes me really sad.
And they're always in big open fields.
Oh, I can't imagine just strolling along and then boom.